Hey guys, what's up? I am Midnight Strike 3625 and I am pleased to announce that Versus is back. And this time we are dealing with one of the most explosive console wars of the early 90s, Sega versus Nintendo. And this is one of the bigger ones that I can't believe I didn't do before. And actually, what a perfect time to do it now because, well, I'm coming off of my hiatus. So, to begin, I'm going to start at the very beginning when Nintendo actually revitalized the video game industry, pulled it from pretty much right out of the shitter, to be honest. I mean, the Atari 2600 pretty much damned the entire industry by releasing inferior ports of arcade games, actually, and just a bunch of other inferior games that were just not up to par, not up to standards, and really didn't have any set goal or any point, any purpose. You pretty much played for score, you pretty much played for competitive edge, and you know, why buy a game for $50 when you're not going to play it that often, and it's a ripoff. I mean, back then games were, you know, $50 or more, and can you imagine paying $50 for E.T. or paying $50 for the Atari version of Pac-Man? You know, I rest my case right there. Anyways, basically that's where the video game industry was, and you guys all know about the video game crash of the 1980s that happened from 1982 to 1985 when the NES, or Nintendo Entertainment System, was released. And this was the debut, well, not technically the debut of Nintendo, as they had the color TV game, but it was their second console and first console overall, and they actually were really smart with this. They marketed as an entertainment system, moreover, and you know, they put a heavy emphasis on entertainment and fun, and that's pretty much what got them through. And they've pretty much, you know, been really consistent with that family-friendly orientation. Even nowadays, you know, with the Wii and the family games and the sports games, almost said Kinect Sports, but you know, the Wii Sports and Wii Fit, stuff like that, just really family-oriented kind of thing. And you know, they established a fan base early on with games such as Super Mario, such as Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Castlevania, Final Fantasy, just to name a few. Even Contra. Contra was great. But anyways, moreover, in the late 80s to early 90s, the Sega Genesis was released. And, you know, right away, early on, they didn't have Sonic. They actually had some other one, Alex Kidd, in the Miracle Wonderland or Miracle World or something like that. I haven't played it, I don't really know. But they wanted to get rid of that just uninspiring mascot that they had that really wasn't getting them anywhere. So they decided to come up with a series of flash advertisements, flashy gimmicks, and just really intense, basically aggressive sort of campaigning. And it worked out in their advantage. It worked pretty much the way they wanted it to, and put them, you know, at a critical edge with Nintendo, as Nintendo ran virtually unopposed in the third generation of gaming. In the fourth generation, it was kind of neck and neck between Nintendo and Sega. So Sega's definitely got the campaign edge, the competitive edge. They were very aggressive. They outright attacked Nintendo. They said literally, you can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does what Nintendon't. They had a whole series of commercials based on this, and you know, props for that. You know, game developers these days and campaign managers and stuff like that would not have the balls to do that nowadays for fear of getting sued or whatever and whatnot. But anyways, Sega definitely had the edge in the campaign and the commercials and the advertisement, the marketing. Basically, they came up with this blast processing thing. Whereas, you know, it wasn't just about Sonic, the little blue hedgehog. Their new mascot, Sonic, came in 1991. It wasn't just about Sonic. It was about running fast. It wasn't just about completing the game. It was about completing it as fast as you possibly can. And with that, you have the blast processing, which allows you basically to move at the speed of sound. Basically allows Sonic to move at the speed of sound. He is equipped with blast processing. That is his weapon of choice, even though blast processing doesn't exist. Sorry, Sega, you don't really have that one. But, you know, I gotta admit, it was a good marketing gimmick. So, while Sega was basically attacking Nintendo and promoting their new and improved, you know, blue hedgehog and all of his friends, you know, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, who didn't appear until later. But they had Sonic, they had Shining Force, they had Earthworm Jim, and just a bunch of other ones. But you know, Nintendo, moreover, just decided to rely on its roots, rely on its fan base, and just advertised what they had. They didn't choose to go the aggressive route that Sega did. They went more of the passive route, just saying, you know, this is who we are, this is what we have. You should already know about us. We released Super Mario last decade, which revitalized the video games and got us out of the video game crash of the 1980s. So, you know, you should be grateful and buy our system because we're awesome like that. And we have Link to the Past, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Super Castlevania 4, and just stuff like that. And we're awesome, so you should buy us. That was basically Nintendo's strategy. So yeah, while they were doing that, Sega was really kind of burning out, so to speak, because when '94 rolled around, Sony released their debut into the video game industry, and that was the first PlayStation, known as, back then as just the PlayStation, but now we call it the PlayStation 1 or the PS1. So that came out, and I believe Mega Man X4 was one of the first games to be released, because back when Sony released PlayStation, it was just basically sprite-based games, even though it was capable of so much more than that. But that kind of, you know, made Sega fall off by the wayside, because they really didn't have anything to compete with that kind of power. So instead of making a new system like Nintendo did with its N64, they decided to focus more on their Genesis and release a series of add-ons, such as the 32X and the Sega CD, which also they advertised flawlessly with that one black guy. You know, what, so you still don't have a Sega CD? What are you waiting for, Nintendo to make one? You know, everyone remembers that. So, so much nostalgia in this episode, I guess. Anyways, what was really interesting about the older gameplay commercials, the gameplay ads, was that they hardly showed any gameplay footage. I mean, you see all these, you know, Call of Duty and Skyrim and just Metal Gear Solid and all those new games that focus more on the gameplay footage, but games back in the 90s, the early 90s moreover, the late 90s they started doing more with gameplay footage, but the early 90s they were still stuck using live action, basically, and they focused more on the gamer himself or herself, because, you know, there are girl gamers out there, believe it or not. Just kidding. But yeah, I mean, they focused on the gamer themselves instead of the game, and it showed the gamer actually in the camera, and it tried to just, you know, suck them into the TV and say, you know, our game is really fun, you should play it, and then it proceeds to show all these flashy animations, and then shows maybe like a second or two of gameplay footage, but they basically relied on special effects outside of the game to get you to buy it, because really they had nothing else to do. They couldn't do anything else to make it any, like, more interesting. There wasn't any of the over-the-top, you know, action scenes like we have nowadays, or, you know, the eye-candy graphics, or the mind-blowing plot revelations that we can show. So they had to rely more on just the atmosphere of the gamer, I guess, and pulling you into what, you know, their world, the world of Sega, the world of Nintendo. So who did the better job at it? You know, well, while I do enjoy a good Sonic game, I gotta say, they're all good, aside from, you know, Sonic 06 and the more recent ones. But, you know, I do love Mario. Mario was pretty much like my second or third video game that I ever played. So I got it when I was like 8 years old, and found out we had an old Nintendo Entertainment System. I was just like, holy shit, I was playing this on the Game Boy Color, now I can play it on the actual TV? Oh, wow. I was just blown away by it. Just playing a game that I had played on the GBC on a big screen. So, you know, Mario holds a lot of nostalgia for me, but then again, you know, so does Sonic. I would always go over to my friend's house, play Sonic 3 on his Genesis, so... And then Sonic Advance as well, first Sonic game I ever owned, which was on a Nintendo system. So, anyways, getting back into it, Sega was releasing a bunch of add-ons for the Genesis, and really, it didn't really get them anywhere. It was kind of seen as a system on life support. Even AVGN, the Angry Video Game Nerd, pointed this out. It looked like a system that was on its last leg, and really they were. And you know, by the time 95 rolled around, they released the Sega Saturn. They realized this too, and you know, no. I've heard so many things about it. I heard it bombed. I don't know exactly, like, how badly. I haven't played a single Saturn game, so I'm not going to harp on that issue too much. I don't really know much about the Saturn. All I know is that was pretty much the first key to why Sega quit making video game consoles, is because it failed so badly. And, you know, they released the Dreamcast, which was completely ahead of its time. Online gaming, first console to support online. It had Phantasy Star Online, as well as Soul Calibur, and a few other arcade ports. So, you know, I know a little bit about the Dreamcast. I really like the Dreamcast a lot. My grandma used to have one. So, you know, that was my first exposure to 6th generation consoles, video game consoles. So, Dreamcast was released in 1998 in Japan, and then 99 in America. So we had that before the turn of the century. And you know, back to Saturn though, I really, like I said, I heard there's a lot of like arcade ports like Virtual Fighter and stuff like that, and Street Fighter, but you know, I don't really know of many other games for it. So all I know is it didn't exactly stand very tall, high and mighty compared to Dreamcast, the Nintendo 64, and the Sony PlayStation. So it was kind of just the third wheel. It was the third system per se. So with the Dreamcast though, it was kind of the same thing. I mean, it was advanced for its time, but once the PlayStation 2 came out, which is my favorite system of all time, by the way, PlayStation 2 has so many good things about it. I could make a whole fanboy video, but I'm not a fanboy, I'm just a fan of it. But I'm not going to right now, that's another time. PlayStation 2 and Xbox were just way, way ahead of the Dreamcast by pretty much everything. They had time. They had time from 1998 to say, you know what, hey, this is the Dreamcast. How are we going to innovate? How are we going to make a better system than what the Dreamcast put out, basically? And the Dreamcast was put out, you know, just 2 years before the PlayStation 2. So, I mean, they had that whole 2 years to say, you know what, this is the Dreamcast, we're going to make a better system. So they did. Xbox did the same thing. So, and then GameCube, which is Nintendo's entry, did the same thing. And ironically, this is where Sega started saying, you know, we lost the war. We're going to secede, we're going to concede respectfully, and start making games for Nintendo. This is the most ironic thing probably in video gaming history, with how aggressive Sega was. And there's still, you can still check out all of the commercials on, you know, YouTube and stuff, and plus they hold a lot of nostalgia for myself. But you know, the Genesis does what Nintendon't. Sega is always going to be better. You know, what are you waiting for, Nintendo to make one? And now they're making games for Nintendo. So, I mean, factually, Nintendo won the war. But, you know, some people still like Sega better as a company, and still likes the games that Sega produces. I, for one, wish Sega would go back and produce another console, but that's just me. Just because the more consoles we have out there, the more innovation, the more people are going to be motivated to make something better, newer, more fun and enriching for the gamer, and just a better experience overall. So, and plus, you know, who would deny an extra console in the mix? I sure as hell wouldn't. So yeah, you know, subscribe, comment below. Which one do you think is better? Because this video, obviously, it's a versus video, so it is designed to generate a little bit of discussion. Although I prefer Sony over both of them, when it comes down to it, Sega versus Nintendo, I would probably choose Nintendo just because of all the flagship franchises that it has, that it possesses. So it's not just about the 4th generation, it's just about the big picture. Which one is better? The companies, the corporate stuff, Sega, Nintendo. Which one was better? I say Nintendo, but you know what, you guys might think something different. And if you do, I would be happy to hear you guys' opinion, because I really want to know just what everyone thinks on this issue, pretty much. So, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, comment below. Links in the description. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. This is Midnight Strike 3625. Keep calm and rock on.